Welcome to Green and Red, Scrappy Politics for Scrappy People, a regular podcast on radical, environmental and anti-capitalist politics, brought to you by Bob Bazanko and Scott Parkin.
Welcome to the silky smooth sounds of the Green and Red podcast. I am your co-host, Scott Parkin, in Berkeley, California. And as always, I'm joined by...
From the Lone Star State, maybe the Lone Star Country if they get their way, Bob Bazanko.
Before too long, yeah.
Before too long, yeah. And as always, please subscribe and share and hit that like button and all that kind of stuff.
What are all those Texans going to do if they can't be proud to be American?
I don't know. Now, will I have to get a passport to 49 other states, or can I just get a visa or whatever to the U.S.? I don't know.
We call it Texit, Brexit? Or is that how...
No, that is what they're calling it, Texas.
Oh, that is what they're calling it.
That is what they're calling it.
You can see how out of the loop I am on these sorts of things.
I hope they do it that way. It gives me even a better reason to get out of here. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
If they're going to have income taxes and property taxes here in Texas, there's no state income tax in Texas. So will the country of Texas have income taxes? I don't know.
Are they gonna invade northern Mexico so they get oil leases or something in order to?
They're not going to tax businesses or anything like that. So.
No, they're going to tax what's left of the Texas middle class. So, folks, this is our State of the Disunion episode, as we'll probably have a lot of commentary about Democrats in the news. We actually have a couple of items already set up for that. And if Biden's going to drop bombs and food into Gaza and then try to take credit for both at the State of the Union, then we're going to give some open, honest feedback about that. This is the State of the Disunion Green and Red podcast. But to kick off, we also want to note that it's just been International Women's Day. And so it'll be a little bit of a theme for some of what we talk about today as well. And to that point, I will start off with This Week in Radical History. And I want to note over the last week has been the anniversary of the death of three really notable radical women. On March 2nd in 1997, revolutionary IWW Earth Firster Judy Bari died at the age of 47. She had rioted against the Vietnam War, then organized wildcat strikes in the Postal Service, and then is most known for building links between bloggers and environmentalists, which led to her car being bombed in 1990 in Oakland, California. And then on March 2nd, 2016, indigenous environmental activist Berta Caceres in Honduras was assassinated in her home. She was a winner of the Goldman Prize. She had been fighting and protesting against an energy company which had been building a dam in her local region, which was going to be displacing and killing people of Linca descent, which she was a Linca descent in Honduras. And then the last one I want to mention, the notable radical woman who passed on March 7th, 1942, was Lucy Parsons, who was an anarchist and a labor organizer. She often came into conflict with the state and with the police. The Chicago police actually were quoted as saying that she was more dangerous than 1,000 rioters. And I just want to say rest in power and salute to Judy Bari, Berta Caceres, and Lucy Parsons.
Yeah, International Women's Day was actually developed by Clara Zetkin, who's a well-known socialist. So it's strayed from its roots quite a bit. And while it's really critical to remember women, like you just mentioned, I think it's also important to point out what American women, as particularly American liberal feminists, are doing right now. We like to pick on liberals a lot, probably not as much as we should. But I noticed yesterday that like all of the known American women, political figures, were tweeting out stuff about International Women's Day, and they're putting up pictures of themselves in all white, like the suffragettes did. Hillary Clinton tweeted about it, and Pelosi, AOC, of course, the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul. And I find it's always ironic and it's always really hypocritical. But particularly this year, right now, what we're witnessing in Gaza are really the most horrific scenes that we've seen since I don't know when. And it's hitting particularly hard against women and children, right? Which is what liberal democratic feminists are always talking about: women, children, reproductive freedom, life, all that kind of stuff. And in Palestine, obviously, that's not possible any longer. What we're seeing is the targeted killing of a massive civilian population. Some of the most horrific images, I can't look at them anymore, of women and children getting blown up, and cesareans. Yes, cesareans are being done without anesthetic. Surgeries are being done without anesthetic. So it's this really brutal situation. And so for American women to support that, or like AOC, not necessarily support it, to get pissed off when people call you out on it, is really troubling, I think, and it should be for all of us. In addition to that, even like what they talked, because I'm seeing today all these, if they pass a national abortion ban, we will be uncontrollable. We'll be in this. Oh, didn't we hear that about Roe v. Wade? Weren't they going to be ungovernable after Roe v. Wade was reversed?
I think they were
I
going
don't
to riot.
remember.
But I missed the riot,
I
obviously.
was going to say, maybe I missed that week, but I don't recall any ungovernable stuff going on. I remember a lot of people tweeting, but nothing. And this, to be clear, I know you can say it's misogynist or whatever. I mean, this is not targeting all women by any means, but if Hillary Clinton and Pelosi and people like that are really even performative leaders, you're in trouble. And I think the fact that they continue to, at best, remain silent, or in fact, like Pelosi and Clinton, enthusiastically and avidly endorse this war, this not even a war, it's a slaughter in Palestine, then I think it calls into question this whole nature of feminism. Feminism is essential. Everybody on the left understands that. It should be one of the most important goals of anybody who's a socialist or a communist or any kind of radical, right? But what we're seeing from these very well-off women, I mean, Nancy Pelosi, right? Nancy Pelosi, her portfolio went up 91% in 12 months. Like most people's pensions went up like 4, 5, 6%. She had a 91% increase. She made 15 million just last year in the stock market. And on Nvidia alone, which is an AI company, which is really in many ways leading this market surge, she was 2 million up on Nvidia, and she's been investing in that for quite some time. Congress, their trades are public, right? You can find them. But there are no laws preventing them from investing in companies over which they have oversight in Congress. And no one, I think, has done that. Pelosi has, but they all have, right? And I really get trouble when I see these kind of feminists invoke Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi and all these people. And there are a few others I want to talk about later when we get into more specific things. But
I do want to note about Pelosi, too, that there were actually 2 women who did an action at her house recently in San Francisco. One's charged with a misdemeanor, one's charged with a felony, and Pelosi is pressing charges against both of them. One
is
of
this
which
when
is
she
a librarian, and one of which is a teacher.
Oh, teachers and librarians are fucking dangerous. You don't want to get around those people. They're as bad as they're worse than the Proud Boys, right?
Yeah.
Are these the women that Pelosi told to go back to China?
One of them is, yeah.
Yeah.
And they're affiliated with our friends at Code Pink.
Yeah, and Pelosi, remember, is urging the FBI to conduct surveillance on protesters, right?
Mm-hmm.
International Women's Day is vital. It's important. The role of women cannot in any way be understated. You just mentioned a few, but there are so many more. Today I got an email from Alice Lind, a group email from Alice Lind, and I thought of just what an important role she's played. And Alice Lind is nothing like Clinton or Pelosi, right? So it's vital, but we need to obviously put in center these women who are actually out there doing something, not fucking making a killing off insider trading or God knows Hillary Clinton. The list of it's such a laundry list. She should be in Gitmo.
And I also want to say that, speaking about being ungovernable, both Judy Bari and Lucy Parsons were targeted because they actually did create an environment which was ungovernable against injustice and destruction of the environment and the power of the bosses and the ruling class. And Berta Caceres was assassinated for it.
Yeah. Today, I can't think of any really voice in Washington, in official circles, at least, more powerful than Rashida TB, who's just been incredible and is courageous. Most of these people are afraid to say anything. She's putting it all out there.
And Rashida TB has actually been creating ungovernable situations, I would say.
Yeah. So. Yeah, Biden, what was it, 20% in Michigan voted uncommitted, 20% Minnesota, 30% Hawaii. And so, no, Rashida TB and Ilhan Omar has been good. There clearly are people out there. And if you look at the images of the protests, New York's finest last night went on a rampage. You want to talk about a violent gang? It's NYPD. But anytime you see images like that, there's just going to be so many women there with JVP, with other groups, and I'm sure they don't feel much affinity for Hillary Clinton or Nancy Pelosi either. Yeah. And this is obviously a media problem as well. Media traffics bourgeois, upper class liberal women. Look at Maureen Dowd and I can't even remember the names of some of the other ones writing like in the Washington Post and New York Times. But it's time. Like the left needs to reclaim a lot of its heritage, and clearly International Women's Day is one element of that. Because when I saw these pictures of Pelosi and White, we defend women, we defend reproductive rights. It's just disgusting. It's nauseating because she is one of the main culprits behind these atrocities, these war crimes, this ethnic cleansing, whatever you want to call it, going on right now. And she's been a cheerleader for that shit her whole life. I was just thinking of calling her. I think of Norm Finkelstein always refers to von der Leyen from the European Union as the Nazi princess.
It also makes me think of the really famous, infamous, whatever quote from Madeleine Albright in the late 90s, where a reporter, I think on 60 Minutes, asked if 500,000 Iraqi children were worth the cost of overthrowing Saddam Hussein, and she said yes. And Pelosi and Clinton both fall into that mindset, into that whatever. But
it's also noteworthy. Look at who Biden has out front doing so much of his dirty work. His press secretary is African American woman, UN delegates African American woman,
Vice President
African American woman. Susan Rice wasn't she in the?
She was some sort of special advisor.
Yeah. And so you notice he hides behind these women, and they go out there and they defend these indefensible, horrific violations of human rights, right?
War crimes.
Yeah, clearly this is a male-dominated economy and political system. No one could, well, you can't question that. Do you see the governor of North Carolina regrets women ever being allowed to vote? He doesn't think they should have been given the right to vote. The governor nominee.
Yeah, the Republican candidate.
Yeah, the Republican. I'm sure.
Mark Robinson.
I'm sure our good friend Pete is all ready to support him, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, yeah, it's when I see stuff like that, you can't help but think of just how liberals should just take everything and they turn it and twist it to their own benefit. And it's easy to make fun of the senator from Alabama the other night because she's nuts, but to deny that the left, not the left, the liberals or Democrats or whatever, have their own versions of those people. They're not as personally stupid and odious as Marjorie Taylor Greene or Boebert, but they have plenty of their own people like that who really are awful. And so let's keep in mind, International Women's Day really is supposed to center radical women, socialist women, anarchist women, groups like that, not Pelosi and Clinton and a bunch of other millionaires, mega millionaires who don't really give a shit and remain utterly silent and complicit when women and children in other societies are being tortured and killed.
Yep.
So not to mention Hillary. Look at Hillary's role in places like Honduras and Libya.
Berta Caceres was probably killed because of a situation in which Hillary Clinton created.
That's why I thought of it.
What I want to talk about, since we're on this sort of theme of the Democratic Party and the State of Disunion, I want to talk a little bit about this new anti-war movement. Bob said we've seen uncommitted voters actually making a real issue of the Israeli genocide in Gaza. And in the Democratic primaries, we saw 100,000 people in Michigan vote uncommitted. We've seen 20% of the Democratic electorate vote uncommitted in Minnesota, 30% in Hawaii. And at the State of the Union, actually, the other night, people blockaded the entrances to the State of the Union, to Capitol Hill, which included disrupting Biden's motorcade itself, which was pretty fantastic. But I want to point to another action, which I was particularly excited about. Maybe not everyone here knows this, but I am from a suburb of Dallas-Fort Worth called Garland, Texas. And Garland, Texas is a very conservative place. At one point, it was the most conservative congressional district in the country when it was represented by Sam Johnson, who's a Vietnam vet and was a far-right wacko in the 80s and 90s. I think he's died now. But it's a very conservative place, is my point.
Today they call him a rhino. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Today he'd be a rhino. But a very conservative place where I'm from, and I've turned out how I have, despite my surroundings as I grew up.
You had some good professors.
I had some good professors, some good friends, and some good professors. But in Garland, there's a General Dynamics, which I think is the fourth largest arms manufacturer. General Dynamics actually has a plant where they make MK80 bombs, where they make BLU 109 bombs. It's actually a blue 109 bomb that was dropped on the Jabalia refugee camp in Gaza in October, killing more than 100 people. But this plant manufactures a lot of weapons in which General Dynamics is selling to the Israelis under a program through the U.S. Department of Defense, where it's shockingly subsidized by the United States government, by the United States taxpayer, if you will. We should do a tax day episode about all the things that our money goes to at some point.
Yeah.
But on Thursday, North Texas is not necessarily the nicest or safest place for protest, but there was a huge direct action at this General Dynamics plant where 23 people were arrested. I don't think all of them were intentionally arrested, because another real vile street gang, which is called the Garland Police Department, which operates like it's the 1950s, actually went and arrested all of these people, which included violence against protesters, ripping the hijabs off of Muslim women who were there. The police were inept at filing reports online that people were left in jail overnight because they're not even totally online with the Garland Police Department. And so I just want to do a shout out that even in some of these most conservative places, my former hometown, we're seeing like people stand up and be very brave. And we're seeing actions like this happen every day, whether it's, targeting politicians or weapons manufacturers or oil companies or what have you. A statement that got put out by the group who did the action is, our community's family members, our people in Gaza are the ones being murdered by Israel, with the bombs being made right here in this facility. We are here today to make it harder for them to commit a genocide. Today's action isn't only about this specific General Dynamics plant, which is where the weapons being used to kill Palestinians are manufactured, but is about interrupting the military-industrial complex, which is responsible for death and destruction around the world. Like I said, I grew up in a place where this local war economy was accepted and normal. That plant has been there since before I lived there. I grew up with people whose parents worked at it. And so I'm just really happy and really proud that people in Garland, Texas went and stood up, or at least in North Texas, went and stood up to push back against the local war economy.
Yeah, that reminded me of in the summer of 2020, remember these protests, they'd taken place in the typical, the usual places, right? San Francisco, Chicago, New York. But in the summer of 2020, there were big demonstrations in all 50 states, and some like Idaho, Wyoming, places like that.
Vidor, Texas.
So there is years ago, I was when I lived in the DC area, I went to everything, right? I never missed anything. So one of the demos, there was a big delegation there from Alabama. And I was talking to him. I was like, that's pretty cool to come all the way from Alabama up to here. When they said, somebody's got to do it. They said, not everybody in Alabama is George Wallace, the name they used at the time, right? And I think that's important to keep in mind too, because it is easy to mock, the people who run these southern states. They're insane. Tommy Tuberville has got to be like, he's dumb as a fucking bag of rocks, but he's a senator, right? But within
hit in the head too many times to practice.
Or maybe he said that about Gerald Ford. He played without a helmet for too long.
He was the tackling dummy a little too many times.
And Marjorie Taylor
Dummy. Emphasis on dummy.
Katie Britt and Tommy Tuberville, man. Like, I don't know what the population of Alabama is, but when those are your two senators and the governor, Kay Ivey. But at any rate, beyond that, and look at Louisiana right now. Louisiana is eliminating parole as of August 1st. No more parole in Louisiana for I forget what kind of crimes. So these are really scary places. But within all of these states, there are fairly significant groups of people who do resist and who reject those kinds of ugly political and social conditions. So it's important to keep that in mind. And so I remember I said that's the Garland Soviet, right?
Yeah.
To you, but it's really cool to see that. In a lot of ways, getting 23 people out in Garland is a bigger story than getting like many thousands out in New York City or Berkeley or wherever,
or blocking the entrance into the State of the Union.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. So,
yeah, that's true.
I mean, they're all good, they're all important, but special shout out to people in those kinds of areas where, you and I have been in the streets many times, and I've only really been like afraid once but if you're in Garland, Texas, you've got to go in there knowing that there's a good chance you might get like clubbed or God knows what. A big, huge shout out to these folks.
And there's as many people who listen to us know, as Bob probably knows, there's been a sort of proliferation of smoke shops and vape shops, and there's different types of I'm blanking on what's called weed which is there's a level of legality with it in Garland, and
Yeah.
so that, or within Texas. And so back in January, there was a smoke shop which actually sold the legal whatever they were supposed to sell.
I think it was Delta 8.
Yeah, Delta 8. And the whatever local Christian fundamentalists complained about the smoke shop being in Garland. So the Garland police didn't really understand what the law is. And so they actually even arrested everyone who worked there and arrested the owner, who got let out later. But I just want to say that's the kind of place in which we're talking about. It's literally like the 1950s there, despite it being like such close proximity to Dallas and being in Dallas County, which has turned somewhat blue over the last couple of decades. But just like really important thing to know: who raids a smoke shop in 2024? That's the question I want to know.
Our vaunted Attorney General, who may become Trump's national Attorney General, who's been
That's just exactly what we need.
He threatened to run against John Cornyn for the Senate, and Cornyn said it's hard to run from prison. It's like Cornyn a little bit of credit for that. But Paxton, weed isn't legal in Texas, but the DAs with police support have decided in a lot of places, like where I live in Harris County, Houston, that they're going to ignore small holdings.
Yeah.
Basically just pretend they never saw it or whatever like that. And Paxton is now going after 5 counties, which have decided to do that. So basically he's saying to the DAs, who are not a liberal group, and the cops, stormtroopers, basically, that they're too liberal on, like, and we're not talking about weed. We're talking about Delta 8, CBD, something like that.
So we're probably talking Harris County, Dallas County.
Not Harris. I think he knows better, because Harris County, well, there were, and again, a little bit off, but it's cool. Harris County had elections last week, and I don't really follow it that closely. But the incumbent DA, Kim Ogg, was crushed, and she's awful. She is a Democrat who, I hate to use the word identity politics, but when she ran, she got a lot of support in the gay and lesbian community, and that kind of was her thing. When she got into office, everybody realized she's just a Republican. She's no different. And she went after, her biggest mistake was going after Lena Hidalgo, the county judge here, who's really popular. And Hidalgo helped take her out, which was pretty cool too. So amid all the horrors, there's a little bit of a slight ray of sunshine.
Yeah, exactly.
But don't take Delta 8 in certain parts of Texas, right?
Yeah. Even if it's legal.
Even if it's legal, shit, I wouldn't be sleeping without it.
The other topic that I want to talk about today was this is a little bit of follow-up on our episode from last week with Graham Klumpner, which is where we talked about Aaron Bushnell, which led into this really great conversation about military resistance and resistance in the military to war and empire and things like that. The Intercept actually reported that Tom Cotten, the right-wing senator from Arkansas, is demanding that the Pentagon investigate left-wing extremism in the military, with a particular focus on Aaron Bushnell. There's a letter that you can actually see on Cotten's website. It was actually in the Intercept article, wanting to know about how pervasive is left-wing extremism in the military. How is it Aaron Bushnell was able to have the thoughts that he did and then end up doing this self-immolation? Part of what I think is really going on here is they're trying to create a counter narrative to the investigations from the Democratic administration of right-wing extremism after January 6th. I do want to say about Aaron Bushnell, as we said last week, he identified as an anarchist, which for all intents and purposes, before his self-immolation, where he was very disturbed, obviously, by what the U.S. is doing to support Israel and Gaza. His main thing is he did mutual aid in San Antonio, where he was stationed. He fed the homeless, and he, believed in horizontal politics. The FBI has different threat categories, one of which is called anti-government or anti-authority violent extremism. And they're trying to lump what Aaron Bushnell did under that, and also the FBI is going to investigate as well. Apparently, the 30% of the investigation that the FBI does related to the anti-authoritarian violent extremists. But I just want to, I think it's just really important to note that we have, one, I think that if there's a red scare that sort of goes on, it targets anarchists. I think that's really obvious. We've been seeing that for a long time. I also think that the right wing is, very much on the defensive, or at one point was defensive around this sort of narrative of violent insurrectionists. I think they're on the offense again. But I just want to say that they're trying to put the focus back on left extremism and anarchists and socialists and radical environmentalists, because that's who is threatening the state, and that's who's threatening the private business and industry and the capitalist class. So I just want to put that out there.
So you don't believe that January 6th was actually an Antifa false flag?
No. I also don't believe it was just a misguided tour of the Capitol either.
Yeah. No, and it goes back to what we were talking about with Graham Plumpner last week before, on how important it is to reach out to the potential Aaron Bushnells of the world. The military they're not cops, as all of us have said many times. And there are a lot of people in the military who are, actually, concerned about what's going on. I mean, you talk to anybody, Vietnam vets, Iraq vets, Afghanistan vets, and a lot of them really came back and became anti-war and anti-imperialist activists. And so I think it's important to reach out. And it's also touching Aaron Bushnell. The only person he hurt was himself physically, right? Mm-hmm. He's not like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and crazy people like Flynn and these other vets. And I think it's unfortunate. I noticed in marches all over the world, they were carrying posters and images of Aaron Bushnell, which reminds me of Vietnam vets who often told me about Norman Morris and how they thought of him in the field in Vietnam. Yeah, and Cotten he's just a horrendous piece of shit because he has degrees from Stanford or Yale or I forget where, and then he acts like he's just a good old boy and he's mad. Anybody, Tom Cotten wrote a book on masculinity, for Christ's sake, and Charlie Sheen writing a book on sobriety, something like that. Right. But he is just an odious garbage piece of shit. Yeah. I'm in a good mood today. So you good? You good now? Or okay? Yeah. I just want to. I'm a one-trick pony today. Often, actually, Scrappy Sundays are often with me ranting about the same thing. And it's easy to attack the GOP, and you should. They're horrific. There aren't words to describe how fucking horrible Trump and all of them. They're McConnell, right? McConnell hates Trump, and then he endorses him, and all these fuckers. But they don't really care what any of us think. The GOP doesn't give a shit what a bunch of professors or activists or podcasters or whatever, they don't care. But so I think it's important also. The first barrier before you can actually achieve anything is like your alleged allies. And I think we're seeing, again, worse than ever, like what they realize. They're showing us who they are. They're not being cryptic about it. I think they have their own cult. It's not violent, luckily, but it's a cult, just these crazies on the other side. And I noticed just this week alone, you saw it on display in New York. The mayor there, who is an ex-cop, who is corrupt and under FBI investigation, but is really starting to crack down on immigrants and basically echoing GOP talking points and having them bust out of the state. The governor, who's a feminist, a liberal woman who replaced Cuomo when he was forced to resign, Kathy Hochul, has urged surveillance against anti-war protesters. And then there was a murder in a subway a couple of weeks ago. So she has now deployed the New York National Guard to the subway, where they're roughing people up. Part of this, too, is because of fare jumpers. New York spent $155 million on extra cops and overtime. They lose $4 million a year in fare jumping. So makes sense. Good math there, right? And Hochul is just really one of the more despicable governors, and she's a good liberal Democrat, like Eric Adams is. Obviously, you have Biden in the State of the Union echoing Trump's talking points on migration and essentially going after Marjorie Taylor Greene, almost from the right. You have, it's interesting, I think. I'm not a huge fan of Fannie Willis, who's used RICO against, I think, like striking teachers and activists. So she's hardly a progressive hero. But clearly the attack on her right now is contrived. What Trump did stands on its own. It doesn't matter. I mean, he asked for 11,000 votes. They have him on tape. But compare the way the GOP is going after her with Merrick Gelding and how he leaves, let's say, Clarence Thomas and Ginny Thomas alone. Doesn't touch him. Democrats don't say a thing. You had a Supreme Court case last week. Nobody said anything before or after that Clarence Thomas was voting on a Supreme Court case in which his wife was deeply involved. And so you can bitch about how evil and horrible all day long that the Republicans are, and they are. But when you have people like that who are afraid to raise their voices, who are just timid and weak, and Merrick Gelding has got to be, I think, is the worst attorney general. I mean, compare him to Barr. And liberals are okay with Barr now because he turned on Trump at the end. But Barr was Trump's personal lawyer. And Gelding is just horrific. He's just a horrible, weak, timid, gutless human. Or else he's on the other side. Maybe he's a plant. I don't know. We saw that Hochul going, New York is giving $850 million to the Buffalo Bills football team to build a new stadium. The owners of the Buffalo Bills, the Pagulas, are really wealthy, and the state's building a stadium. And yet Hochul and Adams are cutting budgets on libraries, on schools, on public health, and everything else. Phil Oakes had it right. I've become older and wiser, and that's why I'm turning you in. And bitch all you want about Trump, but don't expect to get a lot of sympathy when you try to shove that vote blue no matter who bullshit down our throats. And I think many of us are fully aware of the dangers Trump poses, more so to us than most people. And yet, certainly we don't support the guy, but there's no way that Biden deserves any inkling of support from us, given what they're doing, right? They're going after protesters in the street. They're supporting really reactionary positions in like Ukraine and Gaza. Ukraine, they're continuing a war that's just a bloodbath, right? NATO is now up to 32, right? 32 countries versus Russia, but Russia's the gravest threat. And it's monstrous. Russia's a pretty backward place in a lot of ways. In terms of military capabilities, Russia versus NATO is the world champions versus a minor league team or something like that. So the Democratic Party deserves more condemnation than we could give it.
It's also like, I just wanted one that didn't make your list is in the city of San Francisco. They actually just passed a prop, which was backed by a bunch of billionaires, which requires people to get public assistance to pass a drug test, that's what they used to talk about in the 80s. Right. I hadn't actually heard that talked about in a long time, but part of why I think these liberals are just actually really reactionaries is that they just want to protect their corporate sponsors. And so their corporate sponsors want stability. And so they want it to look like someone's in charge. And so whether that's on internationally or whether that's locally in the New York subways or in the streets of San Francisco, that's what these Democrats are trying to do.
Yeah, and a lot of them believe it though. A lot of them just really are at heart. They've got these really ugly racial and gender and all kinds of other ideas that they would never admit to. But let's just scratch a liberal and you find a reactionary or whatever. And again, we're not talking I know a lot of liberals who are really good people. They're fucking awesome. So we're not referring to just like people who we know in daily life. We're talking about people who actually have the power to make decisions.
The other part too that we're seeing with Pelosi and Hochul, where they're targeting anti-war protesters, is that the liberals have this long history of targeting the left and in many ways have decimated the left. And so as anytime we see any sort of resurgence of left anti-authoritarian street politics or anything like that, they crack down. Like the DA of San Francisco, who replaced a progressive DA, Chelsea Boudin, and was replaced by a reactionary Democrat named Brooke Jenkins, like where in San Francisco, you used to get, talking about San Francisco a lot today, but used to get like a walk for nonviolent protests. She's now vowed to prosecute everyone to the fullest extent of the law. And it's disgusting. It's also, hopefully it's going to wake some people up. And I think all of these liberals who are like good liberals, like you're describing, who are probably more, at least sentimentally feel like they're on the left, hopefully it'll wake them up.
Yeah.
And not think they have to support Biden Harris, right?
You and I have been talking about this for decades, right? Why there isn't like a more effective left in the US. And there's no real there's a romantic history of radicalism, which is really important to understand. I get it, but I think too often it gets romanticized to the point where we think it was like successful. It really wasn't that much. The United States doesn't have any history of like a political labor movement. It's had labor radicalism. It's had long stretches of it, but no labor party, no socialist party, really. No history of like really aggressive tendencies, and I hate to say this, or violence, right? There's nothing to really be afraid of from the American left, other than we're going to register to vote and beat you, which is whatever. So the left, we're essentially a pinata for Democrats to punch and pound and poke with sticks and break us. And I think you need to get over that like umbilical, cut that umbilical cord to the Democrats, because it's never going to work. What is 50 years of this bullshit of movie? Biden keeps thinking like, we move to the right, right? And they can't criticize us anymore. Biden said he will sign a bill to ban TikTok, right? Now, who voted for him in 2020, right? A lot of young people. And
a lot of people on TikTok.
A lot of people on TikTok, right? What did he get for? What did they get for it? Have they gotten student debt relief? A few have. Have they gotten marijuana legalization? Nope. What happens when they go in the streets to demand an end to Gaza? They're attacked by cops and called traitors and told to go back to China. And
surveilled by the feds.
Surveilled by the feds, right? And all of these, public health, nothing, right? Doesn't pay for COVID testing, right? So in all of these areas, the Democratic Party is, in I think Colorado in the 60s, referred to the Democrats and Republicans, that little cartoon, as a two-headed pig eating from the same trough.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been saying that forever, but it's just so evident now. It's like I don't want to attack, like some people I know and actually think are good people and I care about or support Israel, which is very difficult. I don't know how. And I hate to sound like this arrogant elitist snob professor or whatever, but I don't know how you can pay any level of attention, even minor attention, for what's happening in Gaza and not be just disgusted and outraged and terrified by that and continue to support it. It's just a horrific thing. And even if you don't give a shit about that, the idea that, I mean, the United States is spending like hundreds of billions of dollars in places like Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan and shit like that. And yet, what do we got here? What do we got here? Services are cut. East Palestine's still dirty. Flint doesn't have clean water yet. We have this massive problem. It's ironic you mentioned, like, you're going to drug test people on aid, right? But what's San Francisco's other big problem? Homelessness. So you start drug testing people on aid. What's going to happen? Homeless problem is going to be even worse, which means that's going to justify even more harsh, violent measures to get rid of the homeless, right? And I don't know if you saw that video I sent you about the freedom in social media, but in Russia, there were 400 people who were arrested and or jailed for social media posts, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, Russia's the worst. How many, did you see the video that I sent you? How many, oh, I sent you, it's a short video. You know how many people in England were targeted and got into legal trouble, arrested or jailed for social media posts? 400 in Russia. How many in England?
4,000.
3,300. So 8 times more, right?
Yeah.
And I've always in my life tried to be careful about the United States is the worst place in the world and it's better, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, now you want to talk about a surveillance state, a security state, whatever. This, where we are right now, is as bad as anywhere in the world. It's funny. I remember when I went to Cuba, one of the guys there, who was really cool, said, be careful. See, this is the safest place you'll ever be. He said, but it is a security state. And I don't know, I heard people there bitching and moaning a lot about the government, about all kinds of stuff. Whereas here, Jesus Christ, you say something or you tweet something. Professor at Texas Tech was put on suspension for tweets. And it's funny because all the articles, and this is the way they do it, right? It's anti-Semitism, right? That's, if any of you have ever seen a Milagro Beanfield War, remember Abrazo Onofre, that's what anti-Semitism is. In Milagro Beanfield War, whenever something happens, this guy lost his arm in an accident, a farming accident. And the legend is that his arm took on a life of its own and it goes around committing pranks and misdeeds, and you blame it. So if somebody comes home later, whatever, oh, it was Abrazo Onofre. That's what anti-Semitism is nowadays, right? Whatever happens, it's anti-Semitism.
Yeah, exactly.
These articles, like this professor from Texas Tech, they don't give a single example of what he actually did or said that was allegedly anti-Semitic, right? And so this is where we are. And liberals are doing this. Liberals are doing this shit. Hochul's a liberal. Pelosi's a liberal. Biden's a liberal. AOC, who runs away from the crowd. And I'm not down on her like a lot of lefties are. I think a lot of people really despise her. And she's a politician who's realized she can have a hell of a future. She's young. She's got all the right kind of media savvy. And I think now she just figures, yeah, I can just coast and be a good Democrat. Maybe I'll be a senator someday. You know? But these are not your friends. And until you do something about that, then the GOP is frankly untouchable. You can't leapfrog and go after the Republicans as long as the Democrats are carrying Republican water.
I also want to point to something else about the Green and Red podcast. Since we've started the show, we've actually been quite critical of the liberal state. And the liberal state is not necessarily you're voting for welfare or equal rights or anything like that. We actually have a number of our early episodes, which I would encourage people to go back and listen to, is about how to expand markets and how to grow capitalism and all that sort of thing. But we've been very critical of liberals, and we've been very critical of Democrats because maybe a small portion of them care about healthcare or care about people's rights or things like that. A large portion of what they stand for is all these things that we oppose, like war and supporting the billionaire class and all that sort of stuff. And I want to say that particularly since Biden came in, we have gotten a lot of feedback from our friends and listeners that we were too hard on the Democrats. We complained too much about the Democrats. We complained too much about Pelosi and Biden on this show. And in the last year or so, I would say that has stopped and that most people agree with us with what we say at this point. When I talk to people now, they have the same complaints that you've been hearing from Bob and I for 3 years. So I just want to throw that out there too.
And you don't even have to listen to us. You don't have to listen to anybody. You just view it, observe it, spend a couple of days reading the paper, even checking out social media, and it's just impossible to miss. And it's pretty grave and fairly bleak and desolate. And so you can do what you can, which is why we do this, and try to make the world a little bit better.
Throw a little inspiration in, a little bit of humor.
Yeah, and which reminds me, if any of you, if you missed it, check out the interview we just did a few days ago with Bev Stoll, who was Noam Chomsky's longtime assistant. And it's a side of Noam that I think is really important to understand because he's such a huge figure and an important figure, but he had a life and he was a funny guy. He could tell jokes. He had grandkids. He enjoyed sports. And I think it's important to understand that we have our life. It's okay. It's okay to have your own life. It's okay to have some fun. Also, don't ignore what's happening in the world there and do what you can. I mean, I don't think it's cool to judge people and attack people for not doing enough. It's hard. But if you go out to a rally, do it. Find out about it. You never know. You can tell somebody, hey, I went to this rally. And somebody might say, oh, no.
If you want to do direct action in a place like Garland, Texas, you should do it. We're down to support you.
Yeah.
It's brave. It's courageous. It's the only
that is. I think a lot of times lefties get imbued with their own sense of radicalism and risk and shit. And much of the time there really isn't there. But doing that's tough, man. I definitely, my hat's off to them because operating in a place like Garland, Jesus Christ. So I'm thinking of like in the heat of the night.
Yeah, exactly. But and anyone wants to know about Garland, Texas, feel free to contact me because I can talk about it all day.
Is Garland next to Plano or it's close to it? Or? Yeah, and Plano is where Collin College is, where they fire professors for asking questions about COVID
and signing petitions
for signing petitions against Confederate monuments.
Yeah,
which is the position of both NASCAR and the U.S. military. So
exactly
against Confederate, yeah. And then that's also where, what was it? The Proud Boys started there, or Stuart Rhodes or something was from there.
Garland is more like northeast Dallas, Fort Worth area.
Yeah.
Stuart Rhodes was in, I'm forgetting what the town is, but it's more southwest of Fort Worth.
Okay.
But actually a very large percentage of people who participated in the Capitol insurrection or Capitol riot or whatever it is we call it actually came from this part of North Dallas. Like there's a lot of the sort of bougie rioters that flew private planes to January 6th actually are from that sort of North Dallas sort of area. So,
which also reminds me of something I forgot to say about Merrick Geldy, because I really despise that guy. Earlier in the week, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously that Trump could not be removed from the ballot, which, and I don't want to get into the legal question. I think it's ironic, though, that the three so-called liberals on the court voted the same way. Can you imagine a single Republican justice doing that? But it also speaks, I think, to the way that the Attorney General dragged his feet, was afraid, kept, what does Carville call them, bedwetters? Carville actually has some great, and Carville's very problematic in a lot of ways, right? He hates the left too, but he really hates Merrick Garland, right? And I think it's also important to point out that he waited so long, and then he finally punched because he's afraid to take it on, and points Jack Smith. And Trump may very well just run out the clock. This should have been done in like March of 2021.
Absolutely.
It wasn't that complicated. And he is, like I said, he's either a gutless, useless, whatever, or he's actually an insider. He's a mole. I don't know which. But again, you can bitch all you want about all that, but when you don't fight, and maybe this is my Sicilian American background coming out at me, but the people who are allegedly on your side who don't fight for you are really, they're worse. They're worse than your enemies. You expect them to come after you. But when this happens, compare Biden's Justice Department to anybody's, right? And even the White House apparently has been fighting against the Department of Justice for quite some time now. So fire the guy. Just shit can him. How many people did Trump fire? Get rid of him. What's so fucking hard about that? You fire the guy. You're president. He serves to say, I want your letter of resignation on my desk tomorrow. Louis DeJoy is still the Postmaster General.
There's many other Trump appointees still in government.
I know. I dislike Biden even more just after talking to you for 40 minutes.
You got a hat? You got a hat?
Yeah, I got a hat. And you can have a hat too.
And you can have a hat.
You get a hat. You all get a hat, right?
Yeah.
We should send Oprah a hat.
We should totally. That would do it.
But she's a real radical activist there. That one.
Folks, if you want to make a $25 donation to the Green and Red podcast and get a trucker hat, which is awesome, the awesome trucker hats. I wear two. There's two different ones I wear on and off all the time. Just email us at greenredpodcast@gmail.com. and we'll set you up. It'll be a $25 donation. Shipping is included in the donation. And then if you want a book, if you want Bob's first book, which is called Masters of War by Robert Bazanko, Military Dissent and Politics in the Vietnam Era, it's $35, and you can email us at greenredpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll get you a book. Also shipping included in that, the cost of that as well. And then if you like what you're hearing, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to us on the audio platforms, give us a rate and review. It helps us with the algorithms. And you can also just make a donation if you don't want a hat, but you want to support us. Go to greenredpodcast.org, hit the support button, or become a patron at patreon.com/greenredpodcast. And it's been fun today.
One last thing, I forgot. It's National Meatball Day.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So if any of you are trying to figure out what to have for dinner tonight, boom, there you go.
Yeah, done deal. I'm going to go do that tonight.
Yeah.
National Meatball Day. We'll close on National Meatball Day.
National Meatball.
Go, everybody else, go out there. Even if it's a tofu meatball, go out and have a meatball, and we'll talk to y'all.
As an Italian, I cannot endorse that. I'm sorry, but
we'll talk to y'all again real soon. Misbehave and make trouble.
Things